Marcus Johnson had always been a man of action. From the moment he started his journey as an entrepreneur, he believed in leading from the front. He wasn't the kind of CEO who sat in a corner office, detached from the day-to-day operations of his business. Instead, Marcus made it a point to stay connected to every aspect of his company. His philosophy was simple: if you want to know how your business is really doing, you need to see it through the eyes of your customers. And that's exactly what he planned to do today. TechSphere, the company Marcus had built from scratch, was now one of the most successful tech retail chains in the country. With sleek, modern stores located in prime shopping districts and a reputation for offering cutting-edge gadgets, TechSphere had become a household name. But Marcus knew that success wasn't just about sales numbers or profit margins. It was about the people, the employees who worked tirelessly to keep the stores running smoothly, and the customers who trusted the brand enough to spend their hard-earned money there. That's why Marcus decided to pay an unannounced visit to one of his flagship stores. This wasn't just any ordinary visit, though. Marcus wanted to experience the store as a regular customer would. He didn't want employees to know he was the boss, because he knew that once they recognized him, their behavior would change. They'd be on their best behavior, eager to impress. But Marcus wasn't interested in seeing a polished performance. He wanted to see the raw, unfiltered truth. So he dressed casually, in a pair of faded jeans, a plain hoodie, and sneakers. He left his expensive watch and designer sunglasses at home, opting instead for a look that wouldn't draw attention. As he prepared to leave his house, Marcus felt a mix of excitement and curiosity. He wondered what he would find when he stepped into the store. Would the employees be friendly and helpful? Would they go above and beyond to assist customers? Or would he discover areas where the company could improve? Marcus had always prided himself on creating a culture of excellence within TechSphere, but he also knew that even the best companies weren't perfect. This visit was his chance to identify any weak spots and address them before they became bigger problems. The drive to the store gave Marcus time to reflect on how far he'd come. Just a decade ago, he was working out of a tiny garage, tinkering with gadgets and dreaming of building something meaningful. Now he owned a multi-million-dollar empire, but despite his success, Marcus never forgot where he came from. He remembered the days when people underestimated him because of how he looked or dressed. He remembered the times when he walked into stores and was ignored by staff who assumed he couldn't afford anything. Those experiences shaped him, teaching him the importance of treating everyone with respect, whether they were a customer, an employee, or a stranger on the street. By the time Marcus arrived at the mall where the flagship store was located, he was ready. He parked his car, took a deep breath, and reminded himself to approach the visit with an open mind. As he walked toward the store, he felt a strange sense of anticipation. He didn't know what awaited him inside those glass doors, but one thing was certain: whatever happened, he would handle it with grace and integrity. After all, Marcus Johnson wasn't just a CEO. He was a leader, a visionary, and someone who believed in the power of change. Today, he was about to put that belief to the test. The moment Marcus stepped into the store, he was greeted by the familiar hum of activity that always filled TechSphere locations. The air buzzed with energy as customers browsed through aisles stocked with the latest gadgets, sleek smartphones, powerful laptops, and smart home devices that seemed to beckon passersby with their promise of convenience and innovation. The store's design was just as impressive as ever. Glass walls let in natural light, neon accents illuminated product displays, and sleek counters invited shoppers to explore further. It was everything Marcus had envisioned when he first dreamed up the concept for TechSphere. But today, Marcus wasn't here to admire the architecture or marvel at the technology on display. He was here to observe, to see if the reality matched the vision he had worked so hard to create. As he wandered through the store, blending seamlessly into the crowd of shoppers, he couldn't help but notice how different this experience felt compared to his usual visits. Normally, employees would recognize him immediately, rushing over to greet him with smiles and handshakes. This time, however, no one paid him any special attention. In fact, most of the staff didn't even glance in his direction. Marcus moved slowly, taking in every detail around him. A young mother nearby was trying to figure out which tablet would be best for her child, while an older gentleman stood puzzling over a set of wireless earbuds. Employees were scattered throughout the store, some helping customers, others chatting casually among themselves. One employee leaned against a counter, scrolling lazily through his phone, seemingly oblivious to the people walking past him. Another sat cross-legged on a stool behind the register, flipping through a magazine without looking up. At first, Marcus tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was a slow day, he thought, or perhaps these employees were simply taking a quick break between assisting customers. But as he continued to walk around, he began to notice patterns. Some employees only approached certain customers, the ones who looked wealthy or well-dressed, while ignoring others entirely. Marcus watched as a man in a suit received immediate assistance from a sales associate, while a teenager wearing ripped jeans and a backpack was left standing alone, clearly unsure of where to find what he needed. Feeling increasingly curious, Marcus decided to test the waters himself. He stopped near a display of smartwatches, pretending to examine the products closely. Truthfully, he already knew everything there was to know about these watches. They were among the best-selling items in the store. But he wanted to see how long it would take for someone to offer help. Minutes passed, and no one came over. Instead, an employee walked right past him, barely glancing in his direction before heading to assist another customer who had just walked in, a woman carrying a designer handbag and wearing expensive jewelry. Marcus sighed softly, feeling a pang of disappointment. He had hoped for better. While he understood that not every interaction could be perfect, this level of inconsistency bothered him. Was this really how this company operated when he wasn't around? If so, it was a far cry from the values he had instilled in the brand from the very beginning. Determined to get answers, Marcus lingered a little longer, waiting for an opportunity to engage with someone on the floor. Little did he know, the next few moments would leave him questioning more than just the quality of customer service at TechSpear. They would challenge his faith in the culture of his own company. After lingering near the smartwatch display for several minutes, Marcus decided it was time to take action. He couldn't just stand there forever, pretending to browse while no one approached him. If he wanted answers, and he did, he needed to push the situation a little further. So with a deep breath, he flagged down the nearest employee, a young man in his early 20s named Ryan, who was leaning casually against a counter, scrolling through his phone. "Excuse me," Marcus said, keeping his tone polite and friendly. "Could you help me out with something?" Ryan glanced up briefly, his expression uninterested. His eyes flicked over Marcus's casual attire, the hoodie, the sneakers, the lack of anything that screamed wealthy customer. Almost instantly, his demeanor shifted. It wasn't overtly hostile, but there was a dismissive edge to his voice when he replied. "What do you need?" he asked, barely masking his annoyance at being interrupted. Marcus pointed to the smartwatch display behind him. "I'm looking at these watches," he said, gesturing toward the sleek devices neatly arranged on their stands. "Can you tell me more about the features? I'm not sure which one would be the best fit for me." For a moment, Ryan didn't respond. He seemed to hesitate, as if weighing whether this interaction was worth his time. Then, without even glancing at the display, he shrugged and said flatly, "Oh, we're out of stock on those." Marcus blinked, caught off guard by the abruptness of the reply. He glanced back at the shelf, where multiple units of the watch were clearly visible. "Really?" he asked, pointing again. "Because it looks like there are still some left right here." Ryan's face hardened slightly, and he let out an exaggerated sigh, as though Marcus was wasting his time. "Trust me," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Those aren't available. You'd have to check another store." The words stung more than Marcus expected them to. He wasn't offended because he had been denied service. After all, he knew how to handle rejection. but because of the underlying implication. Ryan hadn't even bothered to look at the display or ask follow-up questions. He hadn't offered alternatives or suggested checking inventory online. Instead, he had dismissed Marcus outright, assuming that someone dressed so casually wouldn't be a serious buyer anyway. As Marcus stood there, processing the exchange, he felt a wave of frustration wash over him. This wasn't just poor customer service. It was something deeper. It was prejudice, plain and simple. Ryan had judged him based on appearances rather than treating him with the basic respect every customer deserved. And what made it worse was that Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't an isolated incident. How many other customers had been treated this way? How many potential buyers had walked out of TechSphere stores feeling unwelcome or ignored? But instead of calling Ryan out right then and there, Marcus chose to stay calm. He nodded slowly, forcing a tight smile onto his face. "Okay, thanks for letting me know," he said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Ryan to return to his phone. As Marcus moved to another section of the store, his mind raced. He replayed the conversation in his head, dissecting every word and gesture. Had Ryan acted this way because of his clothing? His skin color? Both. Whatever the reason, it was unacceptable. Marcus had worked too hard to build TechSphere into a brand that stood for inclusivity and innovation. The idea that one of his own employees could treat a customer, any customer, with such blatant disrespect infuriated him. Still, Marcus reminded himself why he was here. This visit wasn't about punishing individuals. It was about uncovering truths, however uncomfortable they might be. As much as he wanted to confront Ryan immediately, he knew that doing so would only scratch the surface of the problem. To truly understand what was going on, he needed to dig deeper. And so, with renewed determination, Marcus continued exploring the store, determined to see if this behavior was an anomaly or a symptom of something far more troubling. Feeling unsettled but unwilling to let the matter drop, Marcus decided to see if Ryan's behavior was an isolated incident or part of a larger pattern. He wandered over to another section of the store, this time stopping near a display of wireless headphones. The area was bustling with activity, customers picking up items, comparing models, and asking questions. Yet, as Marcus stood there, pretending to examine the products, he couldn't help but notice something troubling. Certain customers were being ignored while others received immediate attention. A man in a tailored suit walked up to the counter nearby, and within seconds, an employee rushed over to assist him. "How can I help you today, sir?" the employee asked enthusiastically, his tone warm and inviting. Meanwhile, a teenage boy standing just a few feet away, dressed in a hoodie and sneakers similar to Marcus's own outfit, struggled to get anyone's attention. When he finally mustered the courage to ask a question, the sane employee who had been so eager to help the suited man barely glanced at him. "Just a minute," the employee muttered dismissively, turning back to his original customer without another word. Marcus clenched his jaw, trying to suppress the anger bubbling inside him. He had always believed that TechSphere was different, that it stood for fairness and inclusivity. But what he was witnessing now told a very different story. It wasn't just about bad customer service. It was about bias, plain and simple. Employees seemed quick to judge people based on their appearance, deciding who deserved help and who didn't before even speaking to them. As Marcus continued observing, he overheard a snippet of conversation between two employees stationed near the checkout counter. One of them, a young woman with a name tag that read Leela, nodded toward Marcus and whispered to her coworker, "That guy over there looks lost. Probably doesn't even know what he's doing here." Her tone was casual, almost teasing, but the words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He froze for a moment, unsure whether to confront them or keep quiet. Part of him wanted to march over and demand an explanation, to remind them that every single person walking through those doors deserved respect, regardless of how they looked. But he restrained himself, knowing that reacting impulsively wouldn't solve anything. Instead, He took a deep breath and reminded himself why he was here: to uncover the truth, not to escalate tensions unnecessarily. Still, the comment lingered in his mind, gnawing at him. Was this how some of his employees really saw customers? Did they assume that someone wearing casual clothes or looking out of place wasn't worth their time? If so, it went against everything Marcus had tried to instill in the company culture. From the very beginning, he had emphasized the importance of treating everyone equally, with kindness, patience, and professionalism. Clearly, somewhere along the way, that message had gotten lost. Doubts began creeping into Marcus's thoughts. Had he been too hands-off as a leader? Too focused on expanding the business to notice cracks forming in its foundation? Or was this behavior rooted in something deeper, something systemic? Whatever the case, one thing was clear: Marcus couldn't ignore what he was seeing. This wasn't just a minor issue. It was a reflection of attitudes and biases that could damage the reputation of his company if left unchecked. Determined to gather more evidence, Marcus moved to yet another part of the store. As he browsed through a rack of phone cases, he made a mental note of each interaction he witnessed. Some employees were genuinely helpful, going out of their way to assist customers. Others, however, mirrored Ryan's dismissive attitude, brushing off shoppers who didn't fit their idea of a typical tech-sphere customer. By the time Marcus reached the exit, his heart was heavy with disappointment, but also resolve. He knew exactly what he needed to do next. Marcus couldn't leave the store without addressing what he had witnessed. He knew that walking away now would mean ignoring a problem that could fester and grow, potentially damaging the very foundation of TechSphere. With his mind made up, he approached the manager's desk near the back of the store. A middle-aged woman with neatly styled hair and a polished name tag that read Linda was seated there, typing on a computer. She looked up as Marcus approached, her expression calm but curious. "Hi, I'm looking for the manager," Marcus said, keeping his tone casual. Linda smiled politely. "That's me. How can I assist you?" she replied, her voice warm and professional. Marcus took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. "My name is Marcus Johnson," he said, watching closely for her reaction. At first, Linda simply nodded, clearly not recognizing the name. But then, as realization dawned on her face, her eyes widened in shock. Her hands froze mid-motion on the keyboard, and her mouth opened slightly before snapping shut again. "Oh my goodness," Linda stammered, her cheeks flushing red. "Mr. Johnson, I didn't realize it was you. Is everything okay? How can I help?" Marcus nodded, appreciating her professionalism despite her obvious surprise. "Everything isn't okay, actually," he said firmly but calmly. "I've been here for about an hour, browsing the store undercover. Unfortunately, I've noticed some concerning behavior from certain employees." Linda's face turned pale. "Concerning behavior? What do you mean?" she asked, her voice tinged with panic. Marcus explained everything. The dismissive attitude from Ryan, the biased treatment of customers based on appearances, and the overheard comments from Leela and others. As he spoke, Linda listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. By the time he finished, her expression had shifted from shock to guilt. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Johnson," she said earnestly. "This is completely unacceptable. I'll speak to those employees right away and make sure they understand the seriousness of their actions." But Marcus wasn't satisfied with just a quick fix. "I appreciate your willingness to address this, Linda," he said, "but I'd like to speak directly to the employees involved. I want to hear their side of the story and understand why this happened. It's important that we get to the root of the issue." Linda hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Of course. Let me gather them for you." A few minutes later, Marcus found himself standing in a small meeting room at the back of the store. Ryan, Leela, and 2 other employees sat across from him, their expressions ranging from nervous to defensive. Linda stood off to the side, ready to mediate if needed. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began, his tone measured but firm. I visited the store today undercover to see how things operate when no one knows I'm here. During my visit, I experienced and observed some troubling behavior. For example, Ryan, when I asked you about the smartwatches, you told me we were out of stock, even though multiple units were clearly available. And Leela, I overheard you referring to me as someone who probably doesn't even know what he's doing here. Care to explain? Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I thought you weren't really interested in buying anything, he stammered. You were dressed casually, so I assumed. So you assumed I wouldn't be worth your time. Marcus interrupted, his voice steady but carrying an edge. Let me remind you that every customer deserves respect, no matter how they look or what they're wearing. You judged me unfairly, and that's not acceptable. Leela, visibly embarrassed, tried to defend herself. I didn't mean anything by it, she said quickly. It was just a joke between me and my coworker. We weren't trying to offend anyone. It may have been a joke to you, Marcus replied, but it wasn't funny to me, or to any customer who might feel unwelcome because of attitudes like yours. This kind of behavior undermines everything our company stands for. The room fell silent as Marcus let his words sink in. The employees exchanged uneasy glances, clearly realizing the gravity of the situation. Marcus could see the wheels turning in their minds. Some seemed genuinely remorseful, while others still appeared defensive. But one thing was clear. They understood that this wasn't just a slap on the wrist. This was a wake-up call. As the meeting wrapped up, Marcus reiterated the importance of treating every customer with dignity and respect. We built TechSphere to be a place where everyone feels welcome, he said. If we lose sight of that, we lose everything. Let's work together to ensure this never happens again. Back in his office later that evening, Marcus sat alone at his desk, the city lights twinkling outside his window like distant stars. The weight of the day's events pressed heavily on his shoulders, but it wasn't just frustration or disappointment that occupied his thoughts. It was reflection. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as memories flooded his mind. He thought about his early days, long before TechSphere became a household name. Back then, he was just a young man with big dreams and an even bigger chip on his shoulder. He remembered walking into electronics stores as a teenager, eager to learn more about gadgets, only to be ignored by staff who assumed he couldn't afford anything. He recalled applying for jobs where interviewers dismissed him because of how he dressed or spoke. Those experiences had stung, but they also fueled his determination to succeed and to create something better. TechSphere was supposed to be different. It was built on principles of inclusivity, respect, and innovation. Marcus had poured his heart into crafting a company culture that valued people over profits, kindness over convenience. Yet today, he had seen cracks in that foundation. Employees judging customers based on appearances, treating some with warmth while dismissing others entirely. It was a betrayal of everything he stood for. As he replayed the conversations from earlier in his mind, Marcus realized this wasn't just about a few bad apples. Bias wasn't always intentional. Sometimes it was subtle, ingrained, and unconscious. That made it all the more dangerous. If left unchecked, these attitudes could spread, poisoning the workplace environment and alienating customers. The thought terrified him, not just as a CEO, but as someone who believed deeply in the power of fairness and equality. Determined to act, Marcus grabbed a pen and notebook and began drafting a plan. First, he decided to revamp the company's training programs. Customer service workshops would now include mandatory sessions on diversity, inclusion, and empathy. Employees would learn how to recognize their own biases and challenge them. Role-playing exercises would simulate real-world scenarios, helping staff practice treating every customer with respect, regardless of appearance, age, race, or background. Next, Marcus wanted to implement an anonymous feedback system. Customers deserved a way to voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Likewise, employees should feel safe reporting inappropriate behavior among colleagues. Transparency was key. If people trusted the process, They'd be more likely to speak up when something felt wrong. Finally, Marcus envisioned a new initiative called See Beyond. Its goal was simple: to remind everyone at TechSphere that there was always more to a person than met the eye. Posters featuring inspiring stories of underdog success would hang in break rooms. Monthly newsletters would highlight employees who went above and beyond to make customers feel valued. And leadership meetings would start with discussions about fostering inclusivity, not as an afterthought, but as a priority. By the time Marcus finished outlining his ideas, hours had passed. His hand ached from writing, but his spirit felt lighter. For the first time since leaving the store, he allowed himself a small smile. Change wouldn't happen overnight, and addressing systemic issues within such a large organization would take time. But Marcus knew one thing for certain: doing nothing was not an option. As he turned off the lights and locked up his office, Marcus whispered to himself, almost like a promise, "We'll get this right. We have to." Because TechSphere wasn't just a business. It was a reflection of its founders' values. And if Marcus had learned anything from his journey, it was that progress started with acknowledging mistakes and committing to growth. The following week, Marcus returned to the same TechSphere store where he had experienced the unsettling encounter. This time, however, he didn't come undercover. Dressed in a sharp suit and tie, with his confident stride and unmistakable presence, there was no mistaking who he was. Employees immediately recognized him as their CEO, and whispers rippled through the store. Some looked nervous, while others seemed curious about why he was visiting again so soon. Marcus gathered the entire staff in the back of the store for a company-wide meeting. Chairs were arranged in rows, and a small podium stood at the front of the room. As everyone settled into their seats, the atmosphere was tense. No one knew what to expect. Would Marcus reprimand them, fire someone on the spot, or worse, shut down the store entirely? When Marcus stepped up to speak, the room fell silent. He began by sharing his personal story, the struggles he faced growing up, the discrimination he endured early in his career, and how those experiences shaped his vision for TechSphere. His voice was steady but filled with emotion as he recounted moments when people underestimated him because of his appearance or background. "I built this company not just to sell products," Marcus said, pausing to look around the room, "but to create a space where everyone feels welcome. A place where customers are treated with dignity and respect, no matter who they are or what they look like. That's not just my goal, it's our responsibility." He then described his undercover visit in detail, recounting the dismissive attitude from Ryan, the biased treatment of customers, and the overheard comments from Leela and others. The employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats as Marcus spoke, clearly realizing they were being called out. But instead of shaming them, Marcus used the moment to emphasize the importance of self-awareness and accountability. "This isn't about pointing fingers," he continued. "It's about recognizing that we all have biases. Things we don't even realize affect our decisions. What matters is how we choose to address them. Today, I'm announcing new initiatives to help us grow together as a team." Marcus unveiled the revamped training programs focused on diversity, inclusion, and empathy. He explained the anonymous feedback system, encouraging both employees and customers to share their experiences openly. Finally, he introduced See Beyond, an initiative designed to celebrate inclusivity and remind everyone that appearances don't define a person's worth. To hold everyone accountable, Marcus assigned regional managers to monitor compliance closely. They would conduct random visits to ensure employees were living up to the company's values. He also announced monthly check-ins with store managers to discuss progress and address any ongoing concerns. By the end of the meeting, the mood in the room had shifted. Employees nodded along as Marcus spoke, many scribbling notes or raising thoughtful questions. When he finished, applause broke out, a mix of relief and determination filling the air. Linda, the manager, approached Marcus afterward, thanking him for addressing the issue head-on. "We won't let you down, Mr. Johnson," she promised, her voice sincere. As Marcus left the store that day, He felt hopeful. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but the seeds had been planted. For the first time in weeks, Marcus allowed himself to believe that TechSphere could once again become the beacon of inclusivity and excellence he had always envisioned. Months passed, and Marcus returned to the same TechSphere store, not undercover this time, but openly as the CEO. He walked in during a busy Saturday afternoon, when the aisles were packed with customers browsing gadgets and employees bustling around to assist them. The energy in the store felt different now. Brighter, warmer, more welcoming. Employees greeted shoppers with genuine smiles, offered help proactively, and engaged in meaningful conversations about the products. It was exactly the kind of atmosphere Marcus had always dreamed of creating. As he moved through the store, Marcus noticed subtle changes that made a big impact. Posters from the See Beyond initiative adorned the walls, each one featuring inspiring quotes and stories about overcoming prejudice or achieving success against the odds. At the checkout counters, small signs invited customers to share their feedback anonymously, assuring them that their voices mattered. Even the way employees interacted with each other seemed more respectful and collaborative. It was clear that the new training programs and initiatives had taken root. Marcus decided to test the waters again, just as he had months earlier. He approached a display of tablets, pretending to examine the models closely. Within moments, an employee named Sarah, a young woman he recognized from the previous meeting, walked up to him with a warm smile. "Hi there. Can I help you find anything?" she asked cheerfully. Marcus nodded, playing along. "I'm trying to figure out which tablet would be best for graphic design work," he said, keeping his tone casual. Sarah didn't hesitate. She launched into a detailed explanation of the features, comparing models and even pulling up a demo on one of the devices. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and her knowledge impressed Marcus. When she finished, she added, "If you'd like, I can also show you some accessories that pair well with these tablets." "Thank you," Marcus replied, smiling genuinely. That was incredibly helpful. Pleased with what he saw, Marcus continued exploring the store. He stopped near the headphone section, where Ryan, the very same employee who had dismissed him months ago, was assisting a customer. To Marcus's surprise, Ryan's demeanor had transformed. He listened attentively to the customer's questions, offered thoughtful recommendations, and ended the interaction with a polite, "Let me know if you need anything else." Curious to see how far Ryan had come, Marcus approached him after the customer left. "Hey Ryan," he said, extending his hand. "Do you remember me?" Ryan froze for a split second. Then recognition dawned on his face. His eyes widened, and he shook Marcus's hand nervously. "Mr. Johnson, yes, of course. I wanted to apologize for how I treated you last time. I was wrong, and I'm really sorry." Marcus studied Ryan's expression carefully. There was sincerity in his voice and remorse in his eyes. "Thank you for saying that," Marcus replied warmly. "I've noticed a lot of improvement in your interactions with customers. Keep it up. It makes a huge difference." Ryan nodded earnestly. "The training sessions really opened my eyes," he admitted. "I realized how quick I was to judge people based on appearances, and that wasn't fair. I'm working hard to do better." Marcus patted him on the shoulder. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. "Growth isn't easy, but it's worth it." By the end of his visit, Marcus felt a deep sense of pride, not just in himself, but in his team. Challenges still existed, biases couldn't be erased overnight, and there would always be room for improvement. But Marcus knew that progress was possible when people committed to change. TechSphere wasn't perfect, but it was moving in the right direction, a testament to the power of accountability, empathy, and leadership. As Marcus drove home that evening, he reflected on everything that had happened over the past few months. What started as a shocking encounter had turned into a catalyst for transformation. He had learned valuable lessons about the importance of staying connected to his company's culture and addressing issues head-on. Most importantly, he had witnessed firsthand the resilience of his team and their ability to grow. TechSphere wasn't just a business anymore. It was a community built on trust, respect, and inclusivity. And Marcus knew that as long as he led with integrity, the company would continue to thrive, not just financially, but as a force for good in the world.